All right. Let me pull the chat up here on my phone as well. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining. I'm super, super excited for tonight's stream. I've kind of posted about this on social media in regards to Glam, the Greater Lilithian Arcane Mysteries, this wonderful, phenomenal book. And I'm blessed and privileged to have the author of said book here on the channel to discuss all things Lilithian, if you will. So very excited about that. This is a book that running a book club at the shop, different books get selected by a consensus, by popular vote. And this was the September's book club chosen book. And we're going to talk about that. But before I start rambling, go ahead and introduce yourself, babe.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Michael Herkes. I go by the Glam Witch. And when I kind of came out of the public broom closet, I guess you could say, after 20 years of practice to start writing and doing publications, I wrote an article about Lilith and my practice with her in an article for Which Way magazine. And it was so well received, and people are like, oh my gosh, we don't have any information on Lilith. It's so hard to get some good information on her. So that's what turned into this book. And, I love that it's kind of controversial in some ways because of course, the title, the cover, things like that. Glam Witch is the first thing that you see, but then you see in the subtitle that Glam is an acronym for the Great Lilithian Arcane Mysteries, which is the way that I work with Lilith. And it's very personal and it's very different than I think a lot of individuals work with her. But I kind of wanted to put my stance on it, my flavor, because this is, of course, when I started working with Lilith and with witchcraft in general, there was little information that I could find. I was also a teenager at the time, so the information that I had access to was really not available because Ask Jeeves was the thing. The Oracle of Google was not available at that point. And so I really wrote the book that I really wanted and needed when I was coming into my practice.
Well, it's definitely a phenomenal book. And we were talking a little bit before we were officially live because, I have the gift of gab and I can ramble. But what I was saying before we were live, for full transparency, especially because I know that some of the folks from book club are watching this, they're very excited to also get to talk to you as well. So if any of you who are part of book club or not a part of book club, whether it was the in-person meetup or the digital meetup, or if you're just a subscriber of the channel, if you have any questions for Michael, feel free to drop them down below in the comment section. We'll definitely try to get to all of the questions. And yeah, you can drop those down below. But the full transparency thing that I was telling you guys, and this is why it's so funny, is this book is honestly probably in my, I would say, top 10 favorite occult books at the moment now. It really, truly is. And I'm not just saying that to gas you up for no reason, because I'm very, hard, especially on occult academic literature, and I'm constantly looking for new literature because not that there's necessarily a huge issue with some of our older literature, but I think it's a problem when it's 2021 and we're still referencing books from the 90s as like gold star standards within occultism. I think there's occult classics, sure. And I think that there are some books that we should read. And even if there's stuff in those books that we disagree with, why do we disagree with them? We can learn from that as well. But finding more, real substance occult literature in this modern era sometimes is difficult when there's a lot of just purely aestheticism and not a whole lot of substance. And so when this book was first nominated, you guys, I was not a fan. I didn't know anything about Michael. I didn't know anything about the book. Okay. I really, truly did exactly what you're not supposed to do and judge this book by its cover, right? Because I'm looking at this book and I'm like, Glam Witch. Okay. But then I look at the book and I'm like, oh, it's the Greater Lilithian Arcane Mysteries. Well, okay. Now I'm kind of interested. And it's the color palette for me. So then I'm like, okay, let's get into it. Right. So then I start getting into the book. Now I can't put the book down. Right. I was like, I'm going to read a chapter. I'm going to really take my time with this. And I'm just going to read a chapter, every other couple days because we have a month. Well, the book club is every other month. So we basically have 2 months to read and digest the material. I was like, I'm really going to take my time with this. Absolutely not. I like blazed through the book, could not put it down. I think I had it finished in a weekend. And then I read it again as well, and got more out of it the second time that I read it. So it's a fabulous, fabulous book. Absolutely. You've done an incredible job writing this book. And I'm excited to hear your experience of, what was it like writing this book for you? Like, what kind of called you to write this, and what was that like for you writing it?
Well, I always kind of wanted to be a writer. I was the editor-in-chief of my newspaper in high school. Also, for anyone listening, I'm so sorry. I'm like having a cough drop in my mouth and everything. Like I'm dealing with a cold, so I might cough and stuff. But anyways, 'tis the season, right? But I always kind of wanted to be an author. And, I went to this big magical festival in New Orleans called Hexfest. And I saw all of these people doing all these wonderful things. And I've been so solitary in my practice this entire time, working exclusively with Lilith. I just kind of got the urge to like go. If we look at the witch's pyramid, you have the to know, to dare, to will, to be silent. And then if you go to the point, then you teach, you go, you kind of share your ideas and stuff. And so I felt that calling, and I felt this big push from Lilith to really explain, the ways of working with her, that it's not always scary. And even if it is dark, it doesn't have to be scary. It's not negative. And so I wanted to put my twist to it. And I loved, in crafting the book, the title. I mean, I originally thought about calling it Lilithian Magic or Lilithian Witchcraft. And yes, it would have probably, maybe sold more books or something along those lines, because it's very blatantly obvious that way. But for me, Lilith has always been a little bit of a trickstress, kind of like Loki. She works in riddles, and I really kind of wanted to have it be a puzzle that people put together over the course of reading. But the writing process was, I mean, from beginning to end, about a year. First putting the ideas together, putting together a proposal to send it off to major publishers. It was rejected across all boards, except for one UK publisher who wanted to change the title, and I said no. So, I was talking to, again, the editor-in-chief of Which Way magazine, and she was just like, well, let us publish it as the first book that we publish. And I just loved that idea. And it just felt more Lilith anyway, going that route, because it was, maybe not going with society's expectations of the big mainstream and doing something a little bit more on the fringe. So I loved that idea. And then the hardcore writing process was about 4 months. And then it went through editing for like another 2 or 3 months. And then it came back to me to make some edits. And so I'd say that the hardest part of it was the editing. A lot of the time, like writing, it just kind of came naturally to me. I was working a full-time job, in school full-time, and I knocked this book out too. It was always like at midnight. And I just felt like she was pulled through me. And sometimes I read certain sections, I was like, I don't even remember writing that. Like, I feel like she took over my presence and was just like, no, write this, write this, write this. So I really, again, wanted to put something out there that shed her in a different light. However, I will say too, one of the hardest parts was writing the history chapter, which I've gotten so many good compliments on, that it's thorough, but it's not like boring. But let me tell you, the first like 5 drafts of it was so boring. My editor was like, girl, this is a high school paper. The whole rest of the book has so much personality, but it is dry, drier than a old stale piece of bread. So she was like, I need you to get drunk. I need you to get drunk off your ass and record yourself retelling Lilith's story. Do the whole history, record yourself drunk, do that. So I did it, and then transcribed that all back. And that's how the personality came into it. So it wasn't just this boring, stale, academic, blah, blah, blah. Here's Lilith. You all know the story type of a thing. And that was probably the best advice that I ever got. And now it's kind of become my thing as a writer, which kind of sucks because I'm like telling people to get drunk. But like, if you ever get like really, really super, or when I get super stuck, I'll have a couple of glasses of wine or a martini or so. And I just loosen up. I get out of my head. It allows me to really kind of put the ideas into the context that I needed to present. But yeah, did that answer your question? I know we're like doing these mics on and off and everything. So. Oops.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really great advice, and it definitely translated very well in the book. like, because to me, you did present the history aspect of this in such a way that is extremely educational, but at no point in this book is anything ever dry. And I liked the word camp that you chose to use as well. I feel like that is a really good way to kind of describe some of the delicious writing style that you have in this book. And I think that a lot of people can relate to it easier. I know that some people sometimes, like when we're looking at some occult literature, for example, the Lesser and Greater Keys of Solomon is like a very hefty tome in text. And like some people can't get past how completely fucking dry it is. And like they have a hard time reading it. They have a hard time interpreting it and understanding it because of how it's written. So I think that the way that you've written it in a way to where it's accessible for, different learning styles. And I think that's also very Lilithian as well. And I'm not shocked that multiple different publishers would turn something like this down, unfortunately. I think that and this is just my perspective and my opinion. I could be totally, totally off base here and totally wrong, and I would be delighted to be. But I definitely have this perspective that our occult community, I don't think, is as open and as accepting as maybe the wider community thinks that it is. And I think sometimes there's this perception that the community is very much like love and light, and maybe to some degree some people are and whatever, but there's still plenty of preconceived notions and judgment and societal norms that permeate our magical world and culture, especially here in the West. So I think that it's not a coincidence to me that you would have to go this route to publish this book, because I also think that's very on brand and on point for Lilith as well, like, and kind of going against the grain. And something else I really, really liked in this book, and I'm trying to form my complete like thought around it, but it was talking about like fight, fly, or flee. And I feel like that is one of the things in this book that I really, really got something out of, as someone who I feel like I've had to fight my whole life. You know what I mean? Like, girl, my whole life's been a fight. You know what I mean? I've never felt like I've had an option to not fight when I've had to claw my way to get anything that I want in this life, right? Whether it be people, situations, whatever. And so I've always really related to like the ferocity that I have perceived Lilith to have. But when you were talking about the flying and the fleeing and the hiding or whatever, like it was like, that's actually really dope. And I could really benefit from this dialogue because I hadn't valued the real strength it takes sometimes to retreat. Sometimes that's the stronger and wiser thing to do, other than just like Kali Ma blast your way through every possible situation. So that's something that I really, really got out of this book, and that we also talked about in the book club as well. And we had some amazing conversations at the in-person book club, talking about, and I'm not going to say this word since we're live on YouTube, but like, SA type situations, survivors of that sort of trauma, and how, Lilith is such an integral role in this story as well. And listening to these other people in the club, feeling empowered through Lilith to be able to work through some of this trauma and working with her through this trauma, I think, that was really amazing to be able to hear their stories about that and listen to that. So I guess my next question for you would be, what has changed since the publication of this book for you in your life personally, your relationship with Lilith, and your connection to the wider craft community? Like, what does it look like living in your world post Glam Witch?
Okay, so a lot to digest there because I'm going to address like everything you just talked about. So the first thing you had mentioned about kind of like the publishing world and, the broader audiences and things like that, you hit the nail so far on the head. And I'll say that out of all of the haters that I have, they're all pretty much other authors in the community. And when we talk about like love and light to me, it's blinding. It really like blinds you from looking at the true life lessons and the things that you need to go through and what you need to do. Now, kind of similar to like kind of what you were saying. So in the book, in this chapter that I call Bionic Bitchcraft, it's all about defensive magic, protection. And Lilith always had a choice, right? She's always had a choice. She wanted to flee Eden. Even before that, she wanted to flee the Gilgamesh garden that she was in with Ishtar. And I started to really critically look at how does Lilith handle herself in defensive situations? She tends to just remove herself from it. She's just like, bye, I'm not going to stay here. I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to go to where I belong and keep doing what I fucking want to do. And like what makes me feel good and makes me feel empowered. And so, I will say that even in kind of now post Glam Witch, putting myself out there, writing a number of other books, taking my own advice has been one of the biggest things, not getting into the little petty fights on Instagram and Facebook and the blogs and all of that stuff, and just staying out of it and, doing my own thing. So that's been really a big influential part of how things have evolved. But I will also say that, like, Glam Witch, I didn't write it for anything other than to put a book out there and perhaps possibly change someone's life. If I had one person that enjoyed the book and got something out of it, boom, my job was done. But somehow it led to other book offers and other things that kind of opened up to me. So, from a very kind of career aspect standpoint, it really opened a lot of doors. And I love that because, again, it wasn't a mainstream book. It was indie. I always kind of like go back to like how musicians do things and, comparing it to like maybe some indie musicians or things like that weren't like top 40s or something along those lines. I put something out and now it's turned into this whole new thing, for me. And so I'm very grateful for that. And it just helps me talk more and more and more about Lilith. And what I loved was it was you and there was someone else that reached out to me for September. And the Glam Witch was picked for 2 different groups during that time frame. And I just kind of giggled because at the end of September is like where Libra month starts. And my Black Moon Lilith is in Libra. Libra is all about balancing the scales, justice. It's also about, artifice and beauty. So I was just like, oh my gosh, someone spiked the incense that month. Some Lilith incense was, burning away. But anyways, so how has my relationship changed with Lilith? So one thing that really changed, and it was kind of from COVID. When that happened, we all kind of retreated inward. I was also in a relationship that I broke out. We parted ways during it. And instead of really kind of going to that fierce, ferocious Lilith that I've always loved, because like you, I felt like I've always needed to like fight harder than anything to get where I'm going to be because femininity, being a man, blah, 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 all that good stuff, gender stereotypes, sexuality, all of that. But I really started to see Lilith from a more vulnerable perspective. And I started to see like anyone that's strong and powerful and radiates that ferociousness or inspiration, they've all had moments where they're sad and they feel horrible. So I tapped more into the softness of Lilith in that respect, more of the compassion that she has during times of sadness and isolation, feeling like the wandering of her in the desert, like in between that stages of, right after she left the Garden of Eden, if you will, if we're like really looking at her mythology, and she's wandering the beach, the wastelands, all of those different things alone. The sadness that comes with that. But then also, you take that and you learn from it and you become so much more resilient. And that's something that I'm really thankful for, that I've expanded on and now learn and understand more in my personal practice.
You have such a beautiful way of talking. It totally matches the writing style. Like I could definitely just, I don't know if you do have a podcast or not, but like you need to have some audio out there, please. But talking about going against stereotypes as well. And this is something that, I had mentioned in my video review of the book. This is something that I had talked to you about as well. One of the aspects of Lilith, especially as a very venerated goddess in the left-hand path communities, is the fact that she is seen as like this mother of abominations. Abomination being a word of kind of reclaiming this aspect of Lilith, right? Because I think that there's a lot of religious trauma that people have, especially, growing up within Abrahamic faiths. I'm not necessarily trying to shit on Abrahamic faiths, but I'm saying I myself personally, as a practicing witch, as a tarot reader, as an instructor, as a high priestess, have come into so many witches who have like severe fucking religious trauma from their background. And like they've been told, you know, you're reprehensible, you're disgusting, you're this abominable thing, you know, like who you fundamentally are is not okay, blah, 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 blah. We know the whole spiel there. And so this aspect, and I find some of this with a lot of different, what I consider to be dark goddesses associated with darkness, witchcraft, war, death, prophecy. That's kind of my definition of what a dark goddess is a goddess who's associated with those things. I find that a lot of those particular goddesses are very much kind of like shepherds of the disenfranchised, shepherds of the marginalized, you know, mother of the abominable. And I had talked about this, wanting to talk about this as well with, before we were live. But I think, you know, us having this conversation about Lilith as members of the Alphabet Gang Mafia, if you will, and especially with what this weekend is and it being the Transgender Day of Remembrance and how, you know, we're up to 375 and counting trans people brutally murdered in our fucking streets. You know, it would come off very tone deaf to not touch on this adversarial, loving, mother of abominable aspect of Lilith. So I'm sure that you've probably had this sort of dialogue with other people, other queer people or LGBT people as well. But, you know, how do you kind of connect yourself personally, this aspect of Lilith, to what, you know, the dialogue is about? And, what is kind of your perception? Because I know that we had talked earlier too, you've had messages before from men being like, hey, like I'd really like to work with Lilith, but I heard that she doesn't like to work with men, or hey, I'd really like to work with Lilith, but she doesn't like trans women, or whatever. So what is kind of your opinion, dialogue, all that?
Lots to digest there. Excuse me. So first and foremost, like I love what you were just talking about as far as like dark goddesses and how you see them. And it was weird for me because even growing up, I kind of had a hard time kind of understanding why Lilith always got kind of pegged in the dark goddess section, because I always saw her as more sensual and seductive. But it wasn't until I got a little older that I started to realize that she was more the taboo aspects of society. And it's what the patriarchy, you know, main world around us kind of sees. And so to me, I really connected deeply with Lilith because of my sexuality as a gay man. And then even coming into the fold of like calling myself the Glam Witch, which came from just glamour always kind of being around me. I started working at glamour shops right out of high school and I've always loved glamour photography. And when I was at the festival that I went to the first time, someone, you know, at a gay bar later was like, "You're a Glam Witch." And I was like, "I am." So I took that name and I kind of ran with it. And even when I was trying to figure out how to work that in as an acronym, because in the day job, I work with researching companies with acronym names. So I was like, what can Glam represent? And at first I was like, oh, Goddess Lilith and Michael, but that's way too narcissistic, so let's not go there. But anyways, you know, I see Lilith as, again, someone who has, you know, she's a goddess that really represents unconditional self-love. And she is the mother of all the rejects of society, all the things that society says are ugly, are not wanted, and disappreciated. So like when you had talked about the mother of abominations, I was like, ding, 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 jackpot right there. And I always kind of, again, saw her as a mother to the LGBTQ plus community, because she represents sexuality and pleasure for pleasure's sake rather than procreation. And so a lot of times when people want to talk about, oh, she's a child killer, blah, 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 I was like, okay, well, that's a fun myth. But if we were looking like honestly at what was going on in that time in that society, there was a change from sex to being kind of more something you do, you know, when you're married, only a specific way. It was only to procreate. You can't masturbate. You can't do any of that stuff. And then, you know, here's Lilith still doing the old pagan dance from a long time ago. Sex, 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 sex. Yes, power. So, you know, I always kind of related to her in that aspect. And I don't remember the other half of the question, so I'll let you ask it again.
I think you kind of like answered it for the most part. We were talking about like how it is as, you know.
I remember now.
Okay.
Okay. So you had brought up the really important part too. I even when I was working with Lilith back, in my teens, MySpace was the big thing. So I was in the MySpace groups talking to people about Lilith. And I remember one of the cruelest messages I ever got was from this woman, and her name was Tatiana. And that's all I really kind of remember about her, other than what her display picture was. But she told me that it wouldn't even matter if I cut off my dick. Lilith would never love me, and she will never work with me because she only deals with cis women. And so that was a crippling time kind of in my practice because I started to doubt myself and doubt working with her. And a lot of this is residual stuff from like the Dianic turf interpretation of witchcraft and Wicca and all of that stuff. And it's just so silly. Like, yes, Lilith does represent femininity, but not necessarily from a gender standpoint. And I think that we have evolved as a society, or we are evolving as a society, but as a community, we definitely have evolved. And we have to, even what you were saying before, sick of seeing like references from books from the 90s that where are the current people who are like putting a spin on something in a different way? We need to evolve, we need to grow. We can't just keep regurgitating the same thing over and over again. Witchcraft as an act of perpetual transformation, we have to transform as our society does. So again, like I get messages like this all the time from people at left, right, and center, and it's just so sad to me. And I always tell people the only people that should be worried about working with Lilith is anyone that holds any kind of prejudice or hate for others in their heart, because she will tear your ass down. And that's it.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and I'm glad that we're talking about this because I've also received questions as well, whether it be at the shop or online through social media platforms, because a big part of my connection and adoration for Lilith is not only just being a Mesopotamian baddie, okay, because there's that aspect, but there's also being trans, being a member of the Alphabet Gang Mafia. Like, I feel like she is very much kind of a patron saint of this. And for me personally, I know a lot of duals who have dedicated and consecrated their work, a little zhuzh here, a little nip, a little tuck, a little da 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 da, to this great goddess. And this is something that we even see also historically. So the turf aspect, like when turfs kind of take off with this Lilith aspect, it doesn't make any sense to me because there are recorded documentations of us trans people existing even back then. Hello. And then also like dedicating sacrificial aspects to her, trying to see how I say this on a YouTube live, but maybe turning cranes into origami swans and different aspects, and doing that in the name of Lilith and dedicating that to Lilith. Now, that trans aspect of Lilith, I'm not saying that validates or takes away from a cis male's understanding of Lilith. And I've known cis hetero men who have wonderful relationships also with Lilith. So I'm just speaking from my own experience here as a trans person, and relating my physical earthly experience to my spiritual experience. And yeah, so, and I, had talked with you a little bit. I had mentioned this, that I think, especially this weekend, as Lilith is this mother of the abominable, I think that making petitions to her and lighting candles and leaving her offerings and, really presenting her the fact that right now, 375 and counting of her daughters have been murdered out here in these streets because our country is so reprehensible and behind the times. And, I think that's something that a collective could kind of be focusing on, especially like as it's the Transgender Day of Remembrance, and knowing that, 80% of that 375 and counting is trans women of color. That's a problem. And that's a problem that I feel like should be presented to Lilith, as I feel that this aspect of her is totally a part of my understanding of some of her history. And so the whole turf thing about it doesn't make any sense to me, because are there goddesses that maybe do kind of come off a little bit that way? To me, sure. Lilith is not one of those, though.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, everything that you just said. Um, And I think too, it's not only, like when you say the number, like the 375, that's only just here in this country. Like it's not the world. Like there's even worse like shit going on. I mean, what is that number as a whole globe? Like again, it's one of these moments where if we all got together in some kind of a capacity to call upon Lilith for strength and protection and those types of things in honor of this tomorrow, I think it would be an amazing, like, we could see some results. Because I've said before too, I think, and I believe it's in the opener of the book, I really feel like Lilith is the goddess of our generation. We keep looking at, where we're at right now, and we're in this kind of like this weird, in a lack of better way of saying it, like this like Scorpio Pluto kind of an energy where it's like unraveling the truth, digging shit up, and like really like pulling it out and trying to show it to the world. And there's so many voices that have been overshadowed by the norm of society, which is just white, straight, cis men. And now so many of us have more voices. And just, I mean, if we give her a little bit more energy and a little bit more power, we plug, that plug into the socket that is Lilith, I think that we're at that tipping ground where we can actually start making change if we start doing that. But there's something else I wanted to discuss, and I think now is a good time too. I wanted to recommend a certain book to you. It's called The Red Goddess by Peter Gray. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
I love this book.
Oh, okay. All right. So I have it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about that book too, though.
I'm sad because I really damaged my book, like, and I got it in Europe, and I just like a glass of wine spilled all over it. It's all damaged. But I it's an interesting book because it's about Babylon as a goddess and trying to identify who she is. Is she Ishtar? Is she Lilith? And the author's standpoint was kind of very negative towards Lilith. But there was one chapter that I loved where it really talked about Lilith as like her energy being a drag queen. And I loved that. And I was like, you know what? Kind of, yeah, like there's that campiness to her. At least for me, there is. And that's why, with my book and the style that I want to present, it was more of that camp Lilith energy, and how that can transform and give this sense of empowerment. Sorry, I'm going to cough, but I'll let you talk about this book real quick.
That was one of actually kind of my first literature introductions to this kind of archetype of Lilith. And like you mentioned in the book, there is kind of more of a more, I would say, critical view of Lilith. And for me personally, just in my, experience, I feel like the gods are presented in such a way that they are what they are. So like, do I think Lilith is capable of being this horrible, horrific, cruel monster? Sure. Why not? Like, why not? Sure. Do I think that Lilith could be in place? Like with the whole, especially in the Quran, and, there's a lot of aspects of her eating babies. I kind of view this aspect of less about literal the eating of children and more about the liberation of women's reproductive bodies, and the freedom that's there. Now, some people would look at that and think that's morally reprehensible and that's evil. Obviously not me. So I think that, just like maybe a trans woman who's undergoing procedures, like certain procedures, and they're dedicating and working with Lilith and path working while under anesthesia, something could be said similarly with working with women's reproductive rights and like working with Lilith for like the whole safety of this whole experience. And that woman's choice. That's kind of one aspect. So these negative or evil aspects, quote unquote, of Lilith, I also accept into my path and practice. And I kind of view them a little bit differently because we need to keep in mind too, like who's writing this information, right? Like who is writing this information historically, and what was their perspective and what was the culture's perspective at this time. And going into what we were talking about with working with Lilith as well, not only do I think it's about petitioning her and, singing our praises and prayers and this and that, and asking for her to, protect and bless this weekend and the situation and her people. But to me, it's also very much about seeking retribution. I would even go so far as to say like revenge, because I mean, Sarah Blackwood here in my city was shot and killed just walking. Like someone just pulled up on her and boom, boom, left her there basically for dead. And when we're talking about this 375 here in the US, like we're talking about 375 and counting of people who are specifically murdered because of this. It's not just like a trans person died, they're being murdered specifically because of who they are. And so I also think another powerful aspect as a queer person working with Lilith is to kind of channel some of her ferocity and her strength for you to have the courage to be adversarial and go against the grain and go against the norm. I think for me, a big part of working with the goddess is also being a deva, also being an incarnation of this goddess or being the vessel for this goddess. So if you are someone who is maybe thinking about coming out of, the closet, or if you are someone who, especially with Thanksgiving here in the United States coming up, a lot of us are going to be visiting some family. Some of us might have some problematic family members, channeling some of Lilith's strength, maybe making a magical oil and consecrating it in her blessing and her honor, and wearing that when you have to go sit with some of these problematic family members could give you that strength to kind of get through that, because we know the holidays can be so triggering, especially for our community. So, anyway, let me shut the hell up. Go ahead.
No, I love all of that. I mean, you really bring up a really good point too about the holidays and just how troublesome it is for, I forget what you call it, alphabet mafia gang. Like, I love that. I want to start using that, but it is because we have to deal with so many individuals within our family or that are just, adversarial to begin with in that regard. And so, yes, I definitely do paint a very glittery, sparkly image of Lilith, but it's not to disassociate from the more nasty aspects of her as well. I work with her in that regard as well. And that was kind of one of the meanings in that Bionic Witchcraft. You have the choice, decide what you want to do. There's times where, oh my God, I'm not even going to deal with that. Like, there was one time I did this huge hex because I wasn't given a promotion at work because I was a gay man. That was one of the huge times where I needed to call upon her for her claws to dig into each person that sat there and did that to me. And it had tremendous effects and it was fabulous. But there's other little moments of like nitpicking and stuff like that where I'm like, oh, nope, I'll just go away because it's just not worth my battle. It's not worth my energy. I'll save it for something else that's greater and bigger. But I do definitely agree. I think, if you're trying to come out, definitely a really powerful goddess to work with is Lilith. If you're looking to deal with, other injustices that are going on, like there's the, there's riots and different things along these different lines, and the protests and racial wars and different things like that. Lilith is a powerful goddess to call upon to help anchor, channel, and protect you in these aspects where you go out and you fight for those who do not have a voice when you do. She's just so flippin' powerful in so many different ways. And then there's also just the aspect of self and coming into yourself. I mean, in my exploration, like when I first wrote the book, I was coming out the Glam Witch. I remember looking at myself and I was like, I've said that I'm the Glam Witch, and I mean, I know I love fashion and makeup, but I'm not really all that glam. So we're gonna have to I gotta rethink about this. And so it was also in kind of becoming the Glam Witch and taking on this presence and this persona and really, being the embodiment of Lilith that I've transformed in so much more of a way. And I don't feel as though I even necessarily need to call upon Lilith and do like a formal ritual at this point. I feel like she's always here in my back corner and helps guide and protect me in so many different ways. And when there's something that's done that's wrong or something along those lines, it just shit happens at this point. I know, I'm sorry, I have a bad mouth, but I'll let you talk.
Oh, no, you're totally fine. I've definitely dropped the F-bomb several times since we've been live. So, and also like per social media, per platforms, some of this is, controversial. So I'm not going to be shocked if, advertisers or YouTube or who knows and whatever, right? Because, yeah, I mean, just from the past couple days leading up to this weekend and the Transgender Day of Remembrance, which here in Indianapolis, we're having a digital one this year. And I think I'm going to post the Zoom link to that probably in the description of this video. So, I mean, if anyone else wants to attend and like see the vigils and everything that's taking place for these women and men as well, they can do so. I think that this whole aspect of Lilith also being adversarial too. I mean, just from me posting on social media, like on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, like I have like surprisingly lost some followers which like, you know, I do YouTube for fun. I do TikTok for fun. This is for fun. But it was very eye-opening and shocking to me that I would have those types of followers to begin with. And, you know, there are people out there who, like, I don't walk around and, you know, be like, you know, hi, my name is Jasmine and do. Like, I'm not necessarily advertising, but I've never hid this aspect of myself online. And I've talked about it. You know, my channel is not necessarily a trans channel. I just happen to be a creator who is trans. So it does come up in conversations. But the fact that like people, like I'm saying, like, I mean, I had like 25 people drop off of my Instagram, which I'm just like, girl, did you ever think that I wasn't about this? Did you ever, like, because then it made me kind of think too, like, what part of me thought that I would entertain anything other than this? Like, what were you seeing in my reflection? Because especially on social media, people are portraying what they want you to see too. There's also the whole glamour of Lilith as well. And so where did you get the misinterpretation that I'm not pro XYZ? Right? Like, what am I possibly doing wrong? Or what tone am I setting as a creator to where people who have those certain prejudices would even be watching my content to begin with?
Very good point. And I will say that it was right after the Glam Witch came out, and I started to post more in favor of trans rights, women's rights, femininity, wearing caftans, wearing makeup. I have had a slew of cis gay men unfollow me on a lot of platforms because of the whole mask for mask thing, right? And it's just very sad because, you know, I feel as though these individuals, they're doing that because they have a sense of trauma. They were traumatized in growing up. They felt as though, you know, they couldn't be gay. They had to be extra masculine. So anything that's not is so, oh my God, get away from me. So I have noticed a huge decline in gay male followers that are more on the quote unquote butch scale of things, which is very sad and very discerning. But at the same time, I'm just kind of like, you know what? I'm being authentic and true to myself. I'm here to project an image that hopefully can help others and inspire others to come out in their own specific way. In the same way that I've been inspired to come out a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. But yeah, I hear you on that. And, you know, at the end of the day, there's nothing that we can do. If someone wants to unfollow us, go ahead and unfollow us. I'd rather an authentic follower be there who's going to get something out of what I have to say than just someone sitting here and trolling me. But I will also say in that regard, at least from Instagram, which I need to take a moment to discuss because it's a critical thing that continuously happens in our magical community right now with these imposter accounts that are being created. And I've just had my third one now. And, you know, Instagram won't do anything. They just won't. They a lot of times just refuse to even take the one down. Like I remember the first one, they were like, nothing here says that it's an imposter. I can't see anything necessarily going wrong here. But these imposter accounts will go and they'll steal about like maybe 30 to 40 photos of yours, create it and make it look like it's an account, follow a bunch of people, and then randomly message them saying, oh my gosh, you know, I felt a call to write you, give me $300 for a reading, or here's my services. You know, someone sent me a screen message being like, Michael, why are you telling people that you're going to do a spell so that I can have a sex change? Like, absolutely not. Like, there are, like, it's just a big ass, like, mess. So anybody, like, out there, because it's a continuous thing that we're all struggling with, and literally like almost every author right now has been, it's just such a headache. And part of the headache is also too are the flooding of our inboxes of people telling us that this is going on. We all understand, no, we can't all get those verified badges. There's a lot of hoops to do that. We've all tried, we are looking into it, but you know, anyways. So I have one account, it's linked to my website. Go to www.theglamwitch.com. There's my link to Instagram. Always double check, always verify, look at things. You know, the Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all of these worlds, it opens up so many unique and fabulous opportunities for us, but there is a, you know, scam artist out there that will get you one way, left or right, center. So I just, sorry, needed to put that out there as responsibility to make sure that people aren't, you know, getting scammed and stuff. But also, you know, like real readers aren't out here being like, hello, Grand Rising, you know, I felt really called to you. Give me $300 for a reading. Like, don't fall for that. Anyways.
No, and that is so frustrating. I'm glad that, we're talking about that and that you're clearing that up. That's something that I myself, like, I have not published any books. Like, I'm just a little city witch over here, making my little commentary, my little videos, my little content, if you will. And I've had like a couple impersonators also, and they're messaging people about like, oh, you have this curse on you and da 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 da. And like, I've had people message me and be like, girl, what the fuck? And I'm like, that is not me. But mine has not been on Instagram. Mine was on Facebook, which takes even, I feel like, more effort to make look legitimate. Because on Instagram, it's so easy. I feel like just to like totally make a catfish account versus on Facebook, it's like, okay, you've got 13 friends. Like, you know what I mean? Like, your account was created this month. You've got 2 photos. Like, so, and in terms of gay men, falling off from your content or whatever, I will say in my experience, okay, and I'm not throwing our brothers under the bus here necessarily, but it really do be your own community sometimes. It really do. It really do be your own community because I would say about 90% of the shit that I've dealt with as a trans woman has actually come from our own community and has come from very transphobic, problematic, primarily cis white gay men who don't know why they're actually even able to hold someone's hand in public or go to a gay club to begin with, because it's because of girls like us. So the fact that you are so privileged even within our community to where you don't know that, or you've forgotten that it was the dolls who made this possible for you, like that definitely makes my claws want to come out. But talking about some of the questions that are going here, because, we have about 15 minutes left and I want to make sure that we make the most of our time here and not give those people any more time than, what they already take up. So my good friend Nora says, so in my mind, Ishtar, Lilith, and Babylon make up sort of a triple goddess vibe, but not in a maiden mother crone sense, but based off of the primary colors of witchcraft. These colors being white, black, and red. Ishtar as the white, Lilith as the black, Babylon as the red. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I love that. I don't necessarily see. So here, I was thinking about this earlier today because I had a conversation with somebody the other day about Aphrodite, for example, and I was like, "Well, do you see Aphrodite and Venus as the same or different?" And they're like, "They're very similar energy, but they are also very different." And so I definitely see like Lilith and Babylon being the same but 2 different energies, if that makes sense. Like, for lack of better terms, Lilith is Aphrodite, and Babylon is Venus, or something along those lines. I do think that their energy extends from Ishtar, because if we look at the story with Lilith being, the handmaiden of Ishtar, I don't necessarily see them being the same, but they're connected. So, I mean, do they work together? Yes. And I also love your interpretation. I've never really thought about it like that, but thank you for opening, my eyes to that.
And then Hellbound Heathen, thanks so much for joining. If people don't accept all of you, then it's good they go away. Absolutely. Mashallah, period. Little Red says, Michael, what was challenging for you making the Glam Witch? What was a challenge for you?
Oh my gosh. Well, definitely that history chapter. That was a challenge. I think I will say the writing came easy to me. I have a lot of friends that are writers that talk about how painful it is to write and that they don't like it and they don't enjoy the process. I really did enjoy it, especially with it being my first time doing it. I was just so excited to have there something be new. And I'm also an Aries, and we're always known for like doing something new and exciting, but then we don't finish it. So then I finished it and I was like, oh my gosh, I barely finished something in my life. Yay. But oh, what challenging. I would say I think that there was some parts of myself who I was very highly so first and foremost, I'm a perfectionist. I have a Virgo rising. I'm all about perfection. I need to make it all perfect, honey. Okay. And I really wanted, of course, everything to be perfect. And then going through the editing process and stuff, we see that with every book, there's always going to be something missed, no matter how many times there's people that are reviewing it. So I was really critical about the editing process. I got to design all of it, which was great. I was also really hard on myself on how I would be accepted, but I was more critical on myself about other Lilith followers and how they would accept me. And I kind of felt like I was really putting myself out here to be shot down by so many people because it was such a different way of working with her. And I was very scared about it. But again, I've really loved that there has been an embrace to it. And what it's shown me even more was that regardless of who you are and how your personal practice is, when you read the book, you're like, oh, nope, this makes sense. This is Lilith. This is Lilith. I'm working with her in a different way. There's one person I met online and they're like, it's very clear that we work with the same goddess, but my version of her is bloody in a cave at night, and yours is dancing in a field of red roses under the moonlight. And they're both aspects of her, and they're two different ways of seeing it, but it's still the same energy. And I've gotten that same kind of tone from a lot of people who have read it that also enjoy Lilith. So that would be one thing that comes to mind. You're still on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Talking about the duality aspect of Lilith, I completely agree, because there are definitely times in my dealings with Lilith where I feel like I'm getting, or I need more of her, bloody, carnal, animalistic, primal nature of her. And there are other times where I'm really feeling more of her, the rose goddess aspect, and more of this sensual, sexual, seductive, loving, compassionate, graceful. Like, I feel like her energy to me is very much like of that of the rose, because, not to sound like super cliche, but she can have like this silky petal aspect to her, like the silky rose petals and everything. And then she also has these sharp thorns to her as well. And she's very, very complex. And I don't know if I have already sent this to you or not, but there's another YouTube channel on here, to give them a shout out, Grimwire, who he made like a 45-minute long, amazing documentary of Lilith. And I was blessed to have him on the channel as well. And I really, really loved the video and all the effort and work that he put into that video, talking about, how Lilith has evolved and changed from, way, way back up until now. Because I definitely think that Lilith is going through another revival now as well. And like, I think that she's being seen in other lights that, maybe she hadn't been historically, but that doesn't necessarily make it like less valid. Like, I very much believe that we evolve and change, our culture evolves and changes, and how we work with the divine, they're also allowed to evolve and change. I don't think it's a static, stagnant sort of thing that just stays the same congruency over thousands of years. I mean, there's themes that might stay the same, but yeah, I mean, also they say...
I want to add to something with that real quick.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So in the book, I talked, which is very controversial, about the Bernie relief. The standard image of her with the standing on the lions with the owls, like all straight, which has been a major symbol of Lilith for a very long time. But then, went through controversy, and scholars are fighting over, is it this, is it that, yada, yada, yada. I had a lovely opportunity to visit it during the course of writing this book, which was just so unbelievably magical. And I love that I got to write about this, because and also I love that she just talked about it. Our deities transform. We're always changing. We're always evolving. We're always moving. The story continues. And so it may not have been Lilith once upon a time ago. It may not be Ereshkigal or Ishtar. It's probably a forgotten goddess, to be completely honest. But when it first started being attached to Lilith, the energy got put into that. And so when people like start putting energy into something, in the same way that we look at like Marie Laveau in New Orleans, she's got like 17 different places that are apparently her burial ground, but everyone focuses on this one area that like the locals and everything will be like, nope, that's not where she actually was buried. But all of the energy is there. So you create this vortex of stuff. So, for me, I'm always going to welcome that as an image to Lilith, because it may not have been her then, but it is an image of her now, which was a critical reason as to why I put that on the cover of the book.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And, I want to talk, if you have time, a little bit off air as well with you. I don't know, how much time you have this evening. So if you're not able to, we can just text instead of video. When I end this live, we'll still be like on chat together. We just won't be live. And I have a couple of questions for you. One actually regarding that whole topic, because we have revitalists and we have reconstructionists when it comes to the craft. And I think looking at that topic in the lens of working with Lilith, I think that could be a whole thing of its own. But I do want to thank Hyperion. Thank you so much for the $20 super chat. I really appreciate you supporting the channel. And Hyperion says, "Hi, Michael. I'm happy to be a subscriber of yours. Have you worked with the Hawaiian volcano goddess Pele at all?"
Okay, so I talk about this a little bit in my introduction of the book. So when I first got into witchcraft, I saw all this like, ooh, patron goddess and patron this. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I want one. And I got the call of Lilith, of course, because, you know, there was this kind of idea in my head already from this comic book that I read before I got into witchcraft that, you know, Lilith was something that I was interested in. But I was terrified of her. Because again, I could only read negative context on her at the time. This was 2000, literally 2000, like 2000. There was not Google. There was no good books that talked about her. I only had my library and my school computer, which would blank everything out that involved witchcraft because it was a gang and Satanism and blah, blah, blah. But I went on what I call deity speed dating. I tried Hecate. I tried Aphrodite. I tried Pele. And so while I don't have a specific relationship with her, I tried to form one way back once upon a time ago, and I just didn't feel a connection. And I think because Lilith basically stamped my head the minute that I came out of the womb. I mean, even if you look at my birth chart, it's very like, Lilith is yours forever. And during the writing of The Glam Witch, there were so many people coming to me, and I knew it. They were like, Hecate is calling to you. But I was like, nope, because Lilith has made it very clear I am only working with her. So I'm in a very monogamous worship relationship with Lilith, and I don't think that's ever going to change.
Hellbound Heathen also asks a really great question as well, that I think you should definitely address. Hellbound Heathen says, question, where can we purchase your book and make sure that you get the most return? I came in late, and if you already mentioned this, thanks. I think that's especially a great question because, you know, I think supporting occult authors is so critical. And I see people, you know, all the time who just pirate. And like, while I'm very anarchist and like, yeah, let's stick it to the man, maybe let's not do that to our own people, because how the occult evolves and grows over time, you guys, really is a lot to do with these authors. I mean, they are what is kind of keeping some of these mystery traditions alive, you know, in 50 years and 100 years, the Glam Witch text will theoretically be accessible for people to go back and to look at and be like, okay, this is how witches in this era were perceiving Lilith and working with Lilith. So if you're not purchasing from the authors, or if you're blatantly just supporting the theft of these authors' work, I think you're doing a huge disservice to our occult community and the growth of the occult over time and our own people. And I think you're also doing a big disservice to the traditions and styles and spirits and goddesses associated with this as well. But anyway, go ahead and answer that.
Oh my gosh, fabulous question. Thank you so much for asking it. And I always kind of forget to bring this up as well. So the best way to do it is if you go to my website, www.theglamwitch.com, and you click on my books in the link, and then you click on the Glam Witch, and then there's this like link to purchase. It goes directly to my publisher's website. When you purchase directly from the publisher, we make more money. So that's the best way to go about doing it. If for some reason there's technical difficulty or the website's not working, you can also always email contact@whichwaymagazine.com and put an order through for the Glam Witch. Also, if you have a store and you would like it to be in your store for wholesale, that's also the best place to contact as well, for a bigger percentage off. That also gives me a bigger percentage of takeaway. Oh.
Right on. I'm definitely gonna maybe look into that as well and see maybe if we can, you know, have some more of that. Okay. Little Red says, I absolutely love that seeing you now talking about your book. I can see the same amazing personality in you and your book. Great job on your book. And I can't wait to see what else you create. Absolutely, Little Red. I think, you know, we were talking earlier about the camp that's in this book, and I very strongly felt right off the bat, you know, before even speaking verbally and audibly with Michael, I was like, we're going to get along. I'm ready to go to Chicago. I'm ready to, gaslight, gatekeep, and girl boss and have a good gay time in Chicago. I live in Indianapolis, so it's really just like a little hop, skip, and a jump. And I know a couple of other witches in Chicago, and I've never been, and I've wanted to go to Chicago. I have a friend who just got back from a trip up there, a work trip, and went to a bunch of these really cool clubs and everything, and talks and raves about how the culture there is just so much more diverse and open-minded and camp, especially than like Indianapolis. So yeah, I really, enjoy the personality that's in the book. Like we talked about earlier, it's not this dry, I mean, it is academic. I will say that you will be getting some serious academic information out of the book. Like it's not all just, this is my personal experience intuitively. There is truly some historical aspect in this book that you'll definitely get out of, but it's delivered in a way that it's like fun. And you definitely feel like you're having a cocktail with a couple of girlfriends, just kind of like talking about this aspect. Like it's really enjoyable. It doesn't feel like you have like a 75-year-old professor. Well, Lilith, like it doesn't feel like that at all. So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you. You know, I would say that, as far as like deeper texts go, it's definitely the deepest of all of my books that are out there. I would say that another one that's like super high camp is my love spell book. Like, because I wanted it to be, I mean, as a love spell book, talking about love and sex, I really wanted it to be like Sex and the City meets Siddhartha. So, for anybody else who enjoys my writing, I get that same feedback that all of my books, it sounds like you're talking and having drinks with a girlfriend rather than being lectured to, but the Glam Witch has been so far the biggest one that has maybe more of that academia flavor to it, that is a little not as mainstream Insta TikToky, if that makes sense.
I want to say too, I think I was watching another interview that you did here on YouTube with some other folks. I forget which one it was. But when I was getting to know you, trying to get to know your digital self more as an author, I was like, okay, let me do a little bit of research. Okay, let me get to know this person. Right, as we do. And I had watched some of this other interview that you had done. And I think you had mentioned how in your love spell book, there's also like, how do like same-sex love spells, right? Like, or, kind of advice and correspondences on that sort of thing. And that's so fascinating to me because we really, and this is why supporting occult authors is so important, because a lot of our, older occult literature is like, you use this for men, you use this for women, and it's just that. And like, so I'm definitely interested in looking at that book. I've heard wonderful things about your moon one as well. I think we had someone in here earlier who was raving about that book also. So we do have this super chat from Hyperion. Thank you so much for the $50 super chat. Really appreciate you supporting the channel. And they say, love it. I can't wait to work with Lilith for the first time. I'm taking my time, and I love how you both and Orly Stewart have a lot of experiences. I look forward to catching up to you guys. I booked Orly Stewart. I will see her in a few days. Love Orly Stewart. She's amazing. Love Yuri. Good friends of mine. They're fabulous. Nora says, I truly feel like an occult book having some camp or lighthearted humor is so important because, as we've discussed, Jazz, the occult community takes itself far too seriously. Humor is some true magic. Definitely, definitely, definitely. The moon one is so good. See, I'm going to have to like get my little collection of not Herkeses, but Herkes, right? I've definitely been saying your last name wrong this entire time. I'm like, so Herkes.
I liked it though. I was like, ooh, I sound fabulous.
So do you have any closing thoughts here for tonight's stream?
I just want to say thank you, for giving my little book a shot, and for appreciating it, and for continuously giving it a shout out, and getting the word out more about Lilith. That's really the whole purpose of why I did what I was was doing. So just thank you so much for that. And even for tonight's opportunity, I feel sick as a dog, but I still got glammed up as much as I could to come on and chat because I was really looking forward to this. So and I have a lot more things coming. Stay tuned on my website and social media as I have some online classes that'll kind of start coming out in the beginning of the new year that I can't really announce yet. New books, new projects, things like that. So I'm not going anywhere. And come to Chicago.
Yes, I would definitely love to do that. Like maybe in like the spring of like 2022 or something. Real quick too, before we get off of here, I have another question for you. And I think, if you have time, if you could talk about this, because I also would like to hear more about your perspective on this. They ask, can you go into illusion versus illusion? I've struggled with that chapter, but loved the other book. And then also they say you're gorgeous. Sickening, gorgeous, love it, love to see it. So yeah, can you talk more?
Absolutely. So when I was writing that chapter and I was really looking kind of more at like what was out there about glamour magic, because there's still not that much out there about it. I mean, I'll just say this, I'm working on one that's specifically glam, like glamour magic, like literally taking that chapter from the Glam Witch and turning it into a huge coffee table photo book of just fabulosity and fun. It'll be very camp and very vanity, but oh well. I want to do it and I want to have fun doing it as a creator. But anyways, everything that I kept seeing online of people that were talking about glamour talked about it being an illusion, right? Like with an IL. And that's something that to me creates a camouflage of deceit, right? It has a more negative context. And if we're really looking at like what true glamour magic is, because it's not like from the craft where we can just cover our face and turn our hair blonde and do all of these things. We have to go to the store or more importantly a beauty shop to get that kind of a treatment. Whenever we change our appearance in some kind of a way, it's not an illusion per se, it's more of an illusion, which is a concealed reference to something that already exists somewhere else. So no, I don't, for example, I don't wear contacts, but let's say I put blue contacts in. No, I don't have blue eyes. Yes, maybe one could say that it's an illusion because it's faulty, but I'm creating an illusion in my mind because it's something that already exists. A great way to look at it is like Halloween, for example. We dress up in different characters, right? We're not literally becoming them. We're not really trying to make an illusion. We're creating a presence that is based on something else that exists somewhere else, if that makes sense. Taking different pieces of things that you like, whether it be like even dressing up as it doesn't have to be people, it doesn't have to be characters, it can be a tarot card, like your favorite tarot card. What are the colors in it? Dressing up as that, how does that character look in it? It can be animals, like hello, everything in my closet is pretty much pink and animal print. So we got a snake here and we got animals. So that's how I work with glamour magic. Now I'm sure there's other people that kind of do the illusionary, but even to me that's more like a magic show, like an abracadabra, saw someone in half. Like illusionary magic with an A is more creating a presence based off of something that you wanted to create, creating something based off of it's for like personal expression. How I'm a canvas, so how do I want to paint myself today? That's illusion rather than illusion.
Well, as a shapeshifter, I definitely relate to everything that you just said. And I think that I've talked about this with a couple of my other witchy friends who also fall under the trans umbrella, and how we very much feel like, as queer people, as trans people, we're inherently magical. And this aspect of illusion, right? I kind of view it as like, there's a difference here between like trans women and like drag queens. And like, we can talk about, that's a whole other topic. Okay. And not necessarily in relation to what we're talking about today, but like one over here is an illusion, and it's like, it's a gag and it's an illusion and it's performative and it's entertainment. And then I'm over here just trying to go to the BMV and get my license plate renewed. Not for your entertainment, sweetheart. Like I'm going grocery shopping. Like, this is not a performance. So that's kind of how I had interpreted some of that chapter about, essentially taking something that really isn't something and making it look like it is something, or taking something that really is that thing and just enhancing it and amplifying that aspect. Nora says, so it's sort of like sympathetic magic, drawing on the energy of a thing to project those values and aspects, as opposed to trying to trick or distract in the form of something that you're not. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on to my channel. This is one of the longer streams that I've had. Right now it's an hour and 9 minutes, going on 10, which, you know, it's easy to talk to you. It's very easy to talk to you. It's easy to have a dialogue and a conversation. I very much felt like we would have just kind of this natural, comfortable sort of dialogue, as I very much feel like we're kindred spirits in a way. And I think that a lot of people who work with Lilith, there is some of that similarity. Not that it's always all kumbaya all the time, of course, because some people, you know, out there think that like they have some sort of claim to the divine, like it's like their purse or something, like who knows. But yeah, super appreciate you coming on, you know, especially since it's just really cool seeing some of the folks that have been in the chat today who were a part of the September's book club, and then being able to ask you questions directly. So I think that's really amazing. I would definitely, you know, like to talk to you about other things in the future moving forward, off air, if you have time. And yeah, thank you again so much. And thank you everyone who hopped on tonight's live. Lady Raven Moon, Nora, Tara, Hyperion. Thank you so much, Nocturnal, Little Red, Hellbound Heathen, Crafton. Everybody, thank you all so much for, you know, joining. Black Wolf. Let's see, make Star Ruby. Yeah, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. And yeah, I think this is where we're gonna. There's definitely more that we could talk about, but this is where we're going to end this stream for tonight. And yeah, until next time, you know, blessed be, and I'll see you in hell.